Hello and welcome to Mayfly Maven Talk Series and Challenges. Mayfly Maven is a community and ecosystem of women elevating women around the world. These series are for any woman who is interested in changing her mindset or changing to an abundance mindset. This session is about visualization, what it is, why it matters, and how to use it. Last year, I hosted the Wayfinder Summit in Toulouse, and one of the most popular sessions we had was with Katrina Cobb, who is joining me here today. She is a business mentor, artist, writer, speaker, ex-architect, former nonprofit executive director, and travel-loving digital nomad turned expat, who now resides in Mexico, but I'll let her tell you about that. Now, in this 7-day visualization challenge, we invite participants to embark on a transformative journey. It's hosted within the Skool community, and we ask you to deep dive into different areas of your life to unlock a vision that's uniquely yours. Visualization helps us to achieve our goals, and it's something I came to quite late. It creates a clear mental image of the success that you want, and it's good at boosting motivation and reinforcing positive actions. And that's why I'm really grateful that Katrina Cobb is joining us to talk a bit more about it. Hello, Katrina.
Hello, Raj. So thrilled as always to be revisiting this topic and sharing it with more people that can benefit from what seems like a very simple, kind of overly generalized tool, visualization, but is actually super powerful and can be a really great way to fast track and sort of hack your system to get more of what you want in life. So I'm always very excited to share.
Excellent. I mean, ever since I've heard you in Argentina, I've always wanted to continue our conversation on this topic. We have to address the elephant in the room right off the bat, though. There's a lot of people that think visualization is woo-woo and what's it about? And you work on life design, right? So what encouraged you to make visualization a core part of your work? And why is it not woo-woo?
Well, I think whether you want to call it kind of on the woo side of life or whether you want to harness the science of it, I don't know that it matters as long as you accept that it works, right? Like I straddle the woo and the science. That's what allowed me to kind of like jump into believing in these sort of practices that you go back thousands of years, people have been talking about this. Top athletes use it, business executives use it. So there's enough behind it. If you can like make that leap of belief into there's something here, whether you have to understand how it works or not, like there's something to it. And that's sort of where I got started. And what I found is it's been a huge piece almost by accident in the way I started designing my life. And then once I realized what was happening, I started doing it intentionally and things just accelerated in an epic, amazing way. And I have so many ridiculous stories that I love sharing. And I'll probably get to a few of those today, but it's a lot more powerful than just kind of like, oh, put a thing on a vision board. Yes, there's something to that. But what's really happening is you're training your brain of what to look for in the opportunities, because the reality is we receive tens and hundreds of thousands of signals every day, and our brain is filtering them out and only trying to bring that top 1% to your conscious attention. When you program it to look for the things that you want, you see them faster, you can move forward faster. It's such a much more clear path to what you want in any area of your life. Now, I've used this in relationships. We'll talk about the different categories through the challenge in work, in personal life, in travel, in finding a beautiful art studio, in all sorts of different areas of my life now. And I cannot understate the power of getting your brain on board with a clear picture of really what you want. And that's small details to big details, like everything in between.
I think you said a really important word there, which is intention. And it's something I'm playing with a lot right now because one of the things I discuss with my coaches, I've always meditated for reducing anxiety. And I've been doing it for years, like decade even, right? And so one thing she challenged me with is, well, it's time to make it more intentional now because you know how it works, you know where it's heading. And I thought that was really interesting because I haven't thought about that intentional piece of it. So I really think that I'd like you just to dive into a little bit more why
Yeah.
that's such a powerful tool for shaping one's life. Because I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are sleepwalking or feel like they're sleepwalking and want to
Right.
break free of it. But yeah, just a little bit more in the intention would be great.
Well, I think that's a great point, Raj, because we do a lot of things that are kind of in this vein on autopilot. You save things that you like to a Pinterest board, or you see a really cool post of an amazing space or a vacation you'd like to have, or a quote that inspires you on Instagram, and you click save, right? That's actually like part of a step towards visualization, but you're not doing it with a thought of deciding this is what I want, this or better, this is for me, I'm going to seek this. right? So it's that decision point that I think is the piece of intentionality that makes us much more potent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fantastic. And you just said it, which is the thing that stayed with me from our first coaching session, which is this or better. I think
Right.
we're also limited by our own realities. Like we can't envision being a billionaire because we're not one. So we can't think that far into the future to imagine we could be. So we limit our goals a little bit to our realities, don't we? So can you explain the this or better for everybody out there?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite catchphrases, and I will not take credit for it. I actually heard it from a mentor once upon a time in my life as well. And it was such a big, like,
Yeah.
oh, I think the way that I like to put it is we have to stretch ourselves in the new areas and goals. But if we have a belief that it's not for you, then again, we're not deciding that that's the thing we're going to go after, right? There's either a fear or, some limits we put on ourselves of either disappointment or not enoughness, right? Insert X mindset thing, you have, right? And many of us, especially money, is such a triggering topic. I know that's a big piece of what Mayfly does. And it's been a big piece of my work as well, personally and professionally. It's very hard to take that leap and to believe that you can have the things on the other side of a different level of abundance and wellness. Well, but what I found is so powerful about this or better. So when you find an idea, an image, a goal, a desire, something that you want, even if you don't think it's realistic, what's super powerful to open yourself up to the possibility that maybe something like this could be for you is to frame it in terms of, I want something like this or better to come into my life. And that leaves you open to, again, possibility and opportunity. Because I find what goes wrong with visualization or these sorts of goal setting exercises that we do at the beginning of the year or at any time you're working with a coach or on a specific new venture, right? Is we death grip onto a very specific, very limited picture of what we think is possible.
Yeah.
And that's another way of putting limits on ourselves, right? If you only want a client who is in this demographic, at this age, living in this city, with this job, with this family status, with this income level, in this neighborhood, like that's a really, on the one hand, we love the client avatar exercises. On the other hand, like if you're only limiting yourself to that, like what about people that could be even better for you that you're just not aware
Yeah,
of, right?
that's
So
it.
I use that example. It makes you open to the grounding kind of energy and idea of what you want and using that as your anchor and letting that be the guiding point to filter out what you're seeing and the opportunities coming in so that you can be open to something similar but better when it comes into your purview.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that is that we're so open to actually accepting that businesses can pivot, that our products can pivot, that our services can pivot, but our own goals, not so much. So I really love that. I guess then let's take it back a notch because I do want to run through the 7 days as well. But what would be the most effective, simple visualization technique that you'd recommend to beginners?
Yeah.
So people that are listening to this that are like, it's like, yeah, like what's a really tangible first beginner exercise? And then let's dive into the 7 day because I think this is a really nice one if you're committed to trying out this manifestation.
Yeah. So I think the biggest kind of objection we hear when it comes to doing a visualization exercise or something in this vein is that I'm not a creative person. I can't just imagine in my brain like a visual of what I want because not everybody thinks visually. I'm obviously a very visual person, but I appreciate that that's not the norm for a lot of
Just a
people.
side note,
And
these pieces of art behind Katrina are by Katrina, just so that we're aware. Continue, Katrina.
no, that's fair. And so I think what can be a really powerful tool and something that we do with Mayfly when we're in person together at Wayfinders is we use like a bank of images to respond to something and start listening to our kind of innate gut reactions to go, ooh, if we get excited about something, that's like the big green flag. Like that's something that goes in your desire bucket that can go in your visualization exercises. And you could explore a bit more. What about that excites you? What about that are you called to? What about that are you attracted to? What about that is valuable to you? And start getting really specific about which pieces of that then fit into your individual vision. So if you're not a visual person, doing something like, again, scrolling social media feeds, going on Pinterest, going to an image bank. We've got links to Unsplash or Pixabay. There's a couple of free ones where you can just start doing a search for, workspace, office space, partnership, romance, travel. Like, again, pick a category. We're going to get into that.
Yeah.
And start seeing where do you have a like, ooh, like innate reaction, like save, download, save it somewhere. And that can be the first step in your journey. And it's actually really fun. Who doesn't love to
And
browse? We all love to
yeah,
browse.
of course. And ladies, let me just say that there is a bank that's actually available from Katrina in the Skool community so that you already can kickstart that visualization journey. So let's talk about the 7 days because they're very specific and the reasons that you chose them in this order are very specific, right? So
Yeah,
day
right.
one, we talk about envisioning your ideal work day. Now, I imagine that's because we spend most of our time working. But tell me, what are your thoughts?
Yes, and we're also in these communities of entrepreneurial and corporate women, right? And people, with the career aspirations. It's a big piece. It's probably the first piece we're taught to set goals and set these sorts of desires in our life. And so I find it's the easiest baby step into this process of thinking a little bit differently. And so we're going to use something super familiar because you've probably already started setting goals for yourself in business or work, right? But I want to expand what we do in the program is expand it a little further. So it's not just achievement, which is the easiest to set. It's what type of person do you want to work with? What time of day do you want to start? Like, how do you want to spend your time actually working or in the exchange of value, right? What does that exchange of value look like to you? What type of work lights you up? And getting into more of those pieces too, because that's all within your power to change. And we forget when we get like on our career track, we just assume we have to keep going forward. And we sometimes forget that no, literally everything is open to redesign.
I
Everything.
think,
There
you
is
know
not a
what,
single thing in your life.
it's so funny because we've talked about this before, I know offline, but there's this desire in corporate to promote, and you go for that promotion because that's what you're taught to go for in corporations. And then you get there and you realize actually you hate managing people. That's not what you love. So actually
Right.
you now hate work even more because you're doing something you don't actually enjoy, right? Hate's a strong word. We shouldn't say hate. But it's interesting to me because I do the MSA, which is about the structure analysis where you get your energy in. And it's so shocking when people see some of their results because they're like, but I thought I wanted to be a leader. And so, I really like this idea of, I guess I want to get to, it's the feeling. What feeling do you want to have in work, right?
Yeah.
Instead of, I want to get promoted, I want to make more money, I want,
Yeah.
I want, right? But that could also
And
be your desire, but it's the feeling that comes with it.
there's nothing wrong with achievement. Like I am high achiever over here, been there, done that, still doing it, still set goals for myself in that vein, but it's the how. And I think that's what we forget, that there's options. And so
Mm.
it's a very different thing. If you know that like meetings and like being with a lot of people drain you, that like trying to like give constructive feedback drains you and all that, but you're super lit up when you're just like plugged into your laptop doing something creative or filling out a spreadsheet or writing a proposal, or like that's a sign. Like put
Mhm.
yourself in where it's easiest and it feels best. You're going to get a lot more achievement faster if you are aware of that about yourself and like accept that that's okay to chase. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's day one, is our work day, figuring out, putting some time aside to really visualize in detail the kind of work, who you're working with, where you're working from. I mean, for me, the big one is, what does my home office look like? Because I work from home. So
Right.
you clearly have a great studio that you work from, but that's a great first step because like you say, it's more tangible. The second one kind of overlaps that a little bit about designing your ideal daily environment, right? Tell us a bit
Mhm.
more about that.
Yeah. And again, we start with the work. And like you just said, a lot of us do work from home or work from a space where that's a big part of our daily awake time is work related. But this is a challenge to help you stretch again beyond that barrier that kind of limits around yourself with thinking. It can be as simple as like, what do you see when you first open your eyes in the morning? Like, is there something beautiful on a nightstand? Is there a window? Is there light? Is there dark? What are the small details again that add joy and like pleasure to your everyday experience? Like this is what we also negate so easily is we are fully empowered to have a pleasurable daily experience on a micro level 24/7, 365. And we forget like something as simple as having like your favorite mug to sip your tea or coffee from in the morning that just
Yeah.
feel it fits your hand, a design of something that reminds you of something beautiful. These little things we forget, right? So daily environment is all these little things.
Mhm.
It's part of where you live. It's part of how you got your space organized. It's part of where you spend your physical time indoors, outdoors. Do you walk? Do you have
Mhm.
a place in your home where you do some sort of meditative exercise, something like how are you curating is a better word I think to use for your
Yeah,
daily
I like
environment
that.
because that's a fun way of selectively, again, intentionally choosing what you build around yourself, what world you design for yourself. And it can be really fun when you start doing this. And so I think that's super powerful.
the one thing that always jumps out to me on this one is the idea of embracing your senses, because I never think about colors or textures. I mean, of course, we design our homes as we like, but not having enough light coming in so that you're feeling a little bit like you're in the dark. Like I've got a bit of a cave-like thing, which I don't mind being an introvert, but you do start to sense that, oh, I need to get outside, I need to get daylight. And so I think this idea of colors and textures really comes into play. Is it wood? Is it metal? Is it, yeah, like, do you have your
Yeah.
water sitting there?
What's your thing? Yeah.
Yeah,
What kind
yeah.
of like gives you the ooh, again, that the feeling is what we're going for. The daily experience of feeling some sort of pleasure that you can respond to. There's absolutely zero reason not to feel amazing every day in your space, in the places you're curating for yourself. And again, in the small details, from like what sort of glass are you sipping from, to what's the cover on your bed, to what sort of chair do you have, to what sort of light do you have. Again, if you're in a cave, like, do you need more natural light? Like, how do you feel when you're in the dark versus how do you feel in your light? Like tapping into pausing for these things is so huge. Like I am 100% solar powered. So I really need natural light when I
Yeah.
choose to be awake, but I also want the blackout curtains when I choose to sleep. And so I need those extremes. And I know that about myself. And now I've got spaces that cater to those needs, right?
And it might surprise you what you figure out in this session, because like I say, I didn't think about texture and color, but I do
Yeah.
know that I need a tidy desk. Otherwise I can't proceed with what I need to do,
Yeah.
right? I need my notepad, and I need my, which is just a standardized thing that a lot of people I think have, where they need
Yeah.
certain things. Like I need my water on the table. Yeah, so I really love that. But yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And day 3, we're going to jump into, because I think it's a little bit bigger, and I'd love to give your example in this one, but it's the one that keeps the dating apps going. Dream up your ideal relationship. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yes. And this is for you, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're not, whether it's family related, romantically related, friend related, like you can use any nuance of this to improve in any area that you feel like it's not quite where you want it, right? So it's a time to assess like what really lights you up in terms of connection, like human connection. And so romance is the obvious one. But again, I think whether you're actively in a relationship or whether you're seeking, it's so valuable to think about, again, what makes you feel kind of lit up and connected? And also, what are your needs? Like, honestly, what are your needs in a relationship? Like, how much give and take do you need in certain areas? Like, there's so many nuances to this. The story that I tell when I go to these workshops is I use this exercise in great detail to essentially call in my now current partner. We've been together 2.5, almost 3 years now. But it happened like 6 weeks after I spent some time seriously sitting down journaling. I think the joke is I wrote like 5 pages of like characteristics, qualities, how we engage, how he treats me, what he believes in, like these sort of qualitative things. Nothing about what he looks like, nothing about what he does for work, nothing about those normal boxes that we were culturally trained to check by watching too many Hallmark movies, but like
And
the
swiping left and
actual,
right. Yeah.
yeah. I met him on an app though. So like, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
but it was, decades of, in retrospect, understanding what worked and didn't work in my past relationships, what I felt was lacking, what I needed more of that I didn't get, and like putting that into words very specifically, because visualization can also be these sort of descriptive things. If you're not a visual person, descriptively writing out what you want and how it feels to have what you want, so crazy powerful. And as a result, I've got the most freaking attentive, delightful man who loves nothing more than take care of me. And I am super happy to focus on my stuff. And like, he's going to bring me lunch later today. Like he brings me coffee in bed every morning, because I am not a morning person. Like these little itty bitty things. And we joke, because I finally, after meeting him, told him I had this list. And he's like, what? terrified, right, of the expectations that he didn't even know existed. And he finally had the guts to read it. And he's like, this is like 99% who I am. I was like, I know that was the whole purpose. Like I described the qualities of a person. And like, that was so clear when I met you, I could instantly tell like, oh, this is you. Oh, look, yes. All my things. Great, brilliant, wonderful. This is for me. This is for me. Because you recognize it. And that's the beauty
Yeah.
of these exercises, right?
Amazing. And I think that one of the things that really jumped out when we did this session in person in Wayfinders is the growing together. So what are the intangibles? And it's the having not the same goals, but heading in the right direction together, that you feel the connectivity, that you feel the support, that you both can grow as individuals, but aligned to each other. And I thought that was something that really jumped out to our attendees. And this is something I imagine you have with your partner.
Absolutely. That was part of my list, included a growth mindset, but also is working on their own projects, is also a super supporter of my projects, doesn't need to be 24/7, 365, attached at the hip to me, because I am an independent woman. Like, I know I need that time. I need somebody who respects that and appreciates and actually celebrates the things that I'm doing, instead of being jealous of it or feeling slighted when I go and spend hours and days in my studio. Like, I knew that I needed that sort of quality in my relationship, like romantically. But I think this translates to friendships as well. Like, what sort of give and take, what sort of availability do you want your friends to have? How much engagement? Is it online? Is it in person? What frequency? Like, we're so all wired so differently. Like, I'm very much on the introverted spectrum. So like, social engagement a week and I am good. Like,
Yeah.
I need to know what that looks like. But other people need more of the engagement. They need to be around people. And I think knowing that about yourself helps you shape, again, what you're looking for and recognize it faster.
It's so funny because I know that it's too easy for me to stay alone. It's too easy to stay at home, and I'm
Yeah.
happy doing it.
Yeah.
And so when you realize that, like, actually one of my goals is to make sure I leave the house and see a friend at some point,
Correct.
because it's just too, I enjoy my life. And I always think of Helena Bonham Carter. If she wrote a list for her partner, because as you know, she owns a townhouse next to her partner, and they both have their own separate space,
Yeah.
but merge once in a while when they need to for
Yeah.
the kids or whatever. And I think, and it's such a healthy relationship, and everyone always
Totally.
questions it, like, how can that be healthy? You should be in the same bed. And it's like, it works for them. And then I
It
wonder if
works.
she must have written her 5 pages like you, Katrina. So I'm thinking.
I imagine she's a very self-aware woman to know that she wants a separate residence and to have that up
Yeah.
front, because that also helps your conversations, right? If you already know what you want, those conversations are so much easier to like set good boundaries and expectations in the beginning. But having the clarity first is
Mm,
so empowering to you,
yeah.
regardless of whether, again, it's a family relationship, romantic relationship, friend relationship. There's so many different avenues, but being super clear on what you're available for, what you're not, what you need, what you don't, what you're willing to give, what you're not, what you expect, what you don't, like, that's really, really important. And there's no wrong, to
Yeah.
your point, Raj. That's where it's so individual.
Yeah, some people need the all day every day in doing things together. I totally get that, and I respect that, and I think that's exactly right. Just to come back before we move on, just to come back to your other relationships in your lives, and because I
Mm.
do think that's important. I know a lot of women who are single, older, who have wonderful girlfriends and guy friends. But I think even that, in a sense, like, there's sometimes we can keep people in our lives because they've always been there, but they don't necessarily fulfill the expectations that you have now of yourself and your own life. And I've been having those conversations with some girlfriends as well. It's okay to love and care about that person, but perhaps you don't need to see them every week anymore. Like, that's
Yeah.
okay too. Or there might be somebody who really influences and inspires you. So you need to make a more concentrated effort to see them. I always use the network matrix as a really good tool for that. But is there anything else you can add on these? Losing the term
Yeah.
for non-romantic relationships. Isn't there a
Yeah.
term
On the
for that?
platonic, I think, is the
That's it,
non-romantic side, right?
platonic. That's the word.
So I think it's also normal that these needs and desires can change as we evolve as humans, right? So especially if you're in the entrepreneurial circle or corporate woman circle, you might need to be around more people that are also in that vein versus those that took a different path, only because your conversations are different. And you
Yeah.
want to relate to somebody differently in that way. If that's not a paid mentor, that's not a coach, that's a peer in a different way. And so I think there's a ton of value in, again, what are your needs as a human in terms of connection, in terms of engagement, in terms of interactions, and like, think about what that looks like, because there's absolutely nothing wrong. And like, you know what? I need a new work bestie. I need a new career bestie to just like be in a
Yeah.
similar place, have these like next level conversations, whether it's about team, whether it's about advancement, whether it's about boundary setting or like balance or these things. I need somebody who gets it, that I can just like riff with. And again,
Yeah.
community is a good place to find that, but also knowing that about yourself allows you to then start looking and recognize, this person fits
Yeah.
that bill. I'm going to go be best friends with her. Great.
Fantastic. Love it. Thank you so much. I think that's very important, because I think we can get a little bit stuck, or we don't know how to say no, we don't know how to remove ourselves. So I think it's important to address that, especially with the new year, because I know I've been seeing a lot of memes everywhere about stop people pleasing, and part of that is recognizing what you want rather than saying no for the sake of saying no. Really know what you want from that relationship and then go for it. Now the next one, which is day 4, really is one of the ones that I have trouble with, because I've lived in so many different countries like you, lived in lots of different cities, lived in different continents, and like picturing that ideal living location is so difficult because you just want to attach it to a city or a place. And I can't. Personally, I can't. I'm still not sure where I'm going to end up. But what I liked about what you did was it was the elements, not the actual location. So please do share more about that.
Yes, and this is
Location.
where I think your phrase of this or better is most appropriate in your case in this sort of area, right? Because it's not, I must be in Berlin, or I must be in San Antonio, I must be in New York City. It's, again, what are the qualities about that thing that are exciting you? Is it the hustle and bustle of a big, commercial city? Is it you can walk within 3 blocks and find literally everything and hear 8 different languages? Or are you like, I need quiet streets, I need country silence, or like bird song, or like nature sounds in the morning? For some people, it's as, simple as like thinking about, are you more of like mountains, inland, like earth attracted to like that sort of ambient or that sort of environment? Or are you like beach, sea, salt, or lake, maybe, where like water is like really important to you and you feel much more like grounded around water? Like we have natural inclinations, and my story is similar. Like I didn't know where I wanted to land. I was an army brat. I lived in, I don't know, 15 different houses growing up, and then I kept traveling, and then I decided to become a nomad and then lived in like 12 different countries. I didn't have a freaking clue where I wanted to end up, but I was going about it with curiosity. And I will totally admit, like my initial instinct was, of course, I'm going to live by water, beach, nomad, like sand. Yeah, no, I discovered very quickly I am not a beach girl. Vacation's cool once in a while.
Yeah.
I feel a totally different energy when I'm close to mountains, volcanoes, like these sorts of environments. There's something about it for me that settles me differently, that I feel much more creative. I feel tapped into a different energy when I'm in those areas. Like who knew? Like when I spent a couple months in Guatemala next to an active volcano, I felt the most alive I felt like any of my travels. I'm like, that's
Wow.
really interesting, right? But these are the sort of things, right? So when it's living location, think about hustle and bustle. Do you like slow pace, fast pace? Think about amenities. Do you want to be connected to all the social activities, or are you cool with like a slower pace of life? Think about weather. I plan
Yeah.
my travels to be in like 72 degrees Fahrenheit year round, like, because I know that's my zone. I don't want to get cold. I don't want to be sweating all the time. I need that like eternal spring. So like
Yeah.
think about these sort of, again, experiential feeling things. There's so much to that. And again, if you identify those characteristics and have an idea of a place in mind, again, then this or better, like someplace like this would be ideal for me. That way you don't get boxed into like, I must live here. And that feels very, again, restrictive. There's something about expansion versus restriction that I want to encourage anybody watching this to pay attention to. When you have a feeling or reaction to an image or an idea that feels, that's a yes for you. If you have a like, ugh, or you feel yourself kind of like, constricting around the idea, then that's something you probably trained yourself you should want, but you don't actually. And so I
Do
think
you know, it's
that's a really
so,
good sign.
yeah, and it's so funny because when we think about that, I've always thought, yeah, I'd want to be in a warm climate, etc. But actually, the one thing that I love about England, where I'm from, is that it's green all the time, and you don't get that green without the rain. So it's really hard for me to accept that actually I do need those climates once in a while.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't have all the green around me. I can't do dry. I can't, like a Moroccan desert is not going to do me at all.
No.
Or even like
Nope.
southern Spain, etc. It's like
Right.
lovely, but it's a bit too
Yeah.
non-foliage,
Yeah.
no green. And so it's
Yeah.
funny, maybe that comes from where you've grown up, and so it becomes part of your natural, or it could just be that that's what appeals to you. But I think it's a paying attention to that, that just because you thought it was the right thing for you, it's okay to change your mind. I guess that's what we're trying to say, right? Like you said, there's all different people, and it's okay whatever you think, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Excellent. So let's talk about exploring hobbies and passions. I'm going to let you take the lead on this one.
I have a very obvious example.
Yes.
Anybody coming across my world, I was a workaholic, entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, architect, like all the things for so many years. until I landed in this little town in Mexico, which sparked my creativity and started to paint 2.5, 3 years ago now. And it completely like reconnected with an older piece of me, the older creative, the artist that I was when I was a kid. And I got so excited about like, what if I could be an artist at this stage of my life? And started as a hobby, started as classes, turned into individual shows, turned into international exhibitions, turned into selling artwork globally, turned into having my own beautiful art studio now. It's been a whirlwind of the last year and a half of taking this kind of seriously for myself. And it's a new vision. It's a new vision that I had for myself once, like, again, the idea sparked that I had such a positive reaction to emotionally, experientially, that I'm like, oh no, this is for me. Like, I feel super lit up when I'm doing this. I need more of this in my life. How do I make that happen? And started imagining what that could look like. And again, there's stages of this, because the limiting beliefs is such a real thing when it comes to these. Not that you have to turn your hobby into a whole other career. So like, don't take that for what I'm saying. I just tend to go all in when I chase things that I'm excited about. So
Which is also okay.
Also okay. But I hadn't thought about having my own studio. To me, it was still like kind of hobby in my home. Like I was gifted an easel. That's when I started painting, and I started stopped classes, started experimenting my own. And then I had a solo show a couple last year, but I had one towards the end of last year. And a lovely woman came. We ended up chatting in the beginning of the show and just talk about my art, my history, and all that. She's like, you need your own space. And like, she was the one that planted the idea. Like, I hadn't even thought about it. I hadn't even thought I was ready. I was trying to get into the local galleries and like be in joint shows and like do those things. She's like, no, your style is so you need your own space. And like, that would be really successful for you here. And I'm like,
I'd love to see it expand into you supporting other artists as well. This is such a lovely thing.
it's going in that direction, but that sparked for me a whole new vision. And in less than 2 months, I started again doing the visualization exercise. I started looking up art studios, trying to imagine what kind of space I would want. Do I want it like open, like whatever? And I saw some like traditional industrial spaces here, and I was like, but it wasn't the like, yes. And then one day I saw a random post on Facebook of this little colonial style, but it had the white walls that I was looking for. I was very clear that I wanted a lot of white wall space. And like, I had like these details again about what I needed. And also a series of spaces that I can have my office, have my workspace, have a display space. I wanted like very specific things, right? I saw a post on Facebook of an old office people were vacating that was available in a neighborhood that was up and coming that I really like walking around in. And it's like, oh, went and watched it. We signed on the line. There were 7 other people looking at the place that day. And we're like, no, this is mine. Like, signing the lease, this checks all my boxes. Like, I can see exactly how this is going to go. And we're here. And that was probably 2 months after that conversation with that woman. So like, what I'm encouraging you to do is get this or better. Like, when you have a new idea that you emotionally gravitate towards for a hobby, a passion, any of these categories, and like get clear. Like, I did a lot of journaling about my studio space. I was writing about it. I was collecting images about it. I was starting to like piece it together, but also be open to like something like this or better is going to come up to me. And it allowed me to catch it as I was literally scrolling Facebook. I wouldn't have paused otherwise if I didn't have this idea in my mind already. So that's what I talk about when you're training your brain to recognize opportunities. Otherwise, you literally just keep scrolling past in your life, right? And that really allowed me to move forward much faster. Like, now I've got an amazing 3-room studio, like a lease signed that I stole out from everybody else. It was clamoring for this beautiful space. Brilliant. And it's already opened more opportunities for me. So
but I have a quick question for you there, because for the beginners, when you say what you did around it in terms of you started to talk about it, you started to write what you wanted, etc. I mean, what is that time commitment? Because when you think about it, like if you're starting out, and just for people who are listening, if you're starting out, it seems overwhelming that you manifested this in 2 months, but that's because you were doing all these other things, right? But you're not sitting there every day doing, this is what I want for an hour, right? So I just want you to expand. What does that mean? Is because for me, it really refers to the artist way. And I know we've talked about it, where the synchronization happens. When you start to talk about something, it shows up in your life, right? This is just, and it's not just, Apple and iPhone listening to you. It actually does happen that way, where you start to talk about it, you meet more people and talk about it. So please just give us a little bit of insight into what that 2 months looks like, so that people aren't overwhelmed with this idea that I've got to sit there for an hour and manifest.
Yeah. No, that's a brilliant question, because I think you're so right. And I am so the perfect example of that. It does not have to be a lot of effort. Like, that is not how I operate. I'm more of a set it and forget it kind of person. So for me, I've recognized the power is in that clear decision. The power is in that clarity of, this is what I want. These details matter. I want it to feel like this. I need natural light. I don't want it to be too cold. I want it to be walkable. I want it to be where people can come across it. I want it to be open enough that I can have events, like open studios and things, but I want it to be closed enough that I can like have my private space and work. I had these things. So it started with really just thinking the first time, like after that shout out to the conversation, I probably later that night and like maybe over the next week would circle back the idea of like, could I have my own space? Again, the belief, like limiting beliefs, the first piece to crack through. Like if you're looking at the mindset of it, like, am I ready to have my own space? I just started painting a year and a half ago. Who am I to have my own studio? Right. So I had to work through the beliefs first to get on board with like, no, I can totally have my own workspace. Like you're selling artwork, you're doing these things, like you are allowed to have a creative space. You're investing in this as a new path. Like I've got mentorship now in art. I'm doing these other programs. Like I'm serious about it. So I can have a space. And then it got into, I think maybe one like 10-minute session, maybe 2 10-minute sessions over the next couple weeks of like starting to think through, well, if I'm going to have space, because now I've accepted I'm going to have a space, like what could it look like? Right. Because it's a process. It's a process. You have to hack your own brain. But it was probably maybe 2 10-minute journaling sessions. I probably spent anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes over the course of a few weeks, like looking up art studios, looking up art studio organization, looking up like examples of what other artists were doing, how they were hanging things, how they were working. They have easels, they have a wall system, what sort of like, how are they organizing their paints? Like I wanted to like figure out these little details of what I wanted. And I started saving these images, I think on Instagram, actually, Instagram and Google. I was just literally just doing an image search to try to like visually start to get in mind. Because again, this is new for me. I've never had a space. So I didn't already have a preconceived visual idea of what I wanted. And I think that's what's helpful about this process is the reaction, giving yourself something to react to and have that yes reaction or no reaction. And then deciding, okay, this or better, like something like this is what I want for myself. So it was maybe, again, those 2 10-minute journaling sessions, probably a week or so apart, a 10 to 30 minute, I lose track of time when I'm scrolling and searching images. So I'm going to guess 30 minutes of like image searches. And then it was set it and forget it. And then it was just like, this is going to happen when it's ready. I'll just keep my eye out now that I know what I want. It was that decision and that intention.
There's still that intention there. Exactly. So if you were, let's say, as another example, you want to get passionate about cooking, then you might be on Instagram, you might start saving recipes, you might start looking at techniques, and then eventually maybe the right course will come along, or you'll just start to put together a dinner party or something, who knows, right? So that's a really, thank you for that synopsis, because I think you might scare people off with how on earth did she do this, right? But I think, let's finish the 7 days, and then I want to talk a little bit about a podcast that I heard and the reprogram that we talked about earlier. So day 6, let's go back into day 6, because we did talk about relationships, but what I find interesting about your ideal social life is it's what we talked about, is understanding how many activities, what activities you're willing to leave the home for, what is balance going to look like for you. And it's different for everybody, right? You and I are both on the introversion scale, but for other people, it's actively making lunch plans every single day for the week, right? So let's talk about social life.
Yeah, and I think that looks, again, to your point, so different for everybody. Some of us, we thrive on the energy of being in other people's space. Some of us are happier in a much bigger, more diverse group of people. Others are happy to have our, 3 to 5 close friends that we kind of rotate through, or we catch up with every few months, or that kind of thing. I think it has to look different for everybody. Like I look at it from an energy perspective, like from the introverted side of things. Like I know I can handle like 1 event a week, and my partner is super social. He is a social butterfly. He loves to invite people over for dinner. He loves to cook for them. He loves to have the whole thing. We sit up talking, we drink bottles of wine, like da, 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 da. It's amazing. And it's a lot of energy. So like we've had the conversation of how much I'm available for.
Yeah.
Because I love his dinner. I love him, but not every day. Like, so we had to have this talk about like, what does that look like? Right. But even that level of awareness of what's fun for you versus what's like crossing the line of what's no longer fun, I think is super important. I prefer one-on-one interactions. I don't prefer group things, right? So these are examples of what you can think about how you function. I also am admittedly not amazing at keeping in touch with people online, even though I'm connected to bazillions of people online because of all my travels and my lifestyle. I like responding to messages, but I'm terrible at sending them. So that's something I could think about. Like, how do I facilitate more connection points with people in a different way? And like, that's part of me navigating, like, what do I really want this to look like? And how do I want to keep the people that actually matter to me in my life? And how often, what media,
Yeah.
like, what does that look like? Right. So these are some just ways to get you thinking. Because again, there's
Yeah.
no right and wrong. This has to be something that again feels good for you and suits kind of your personal needs, right?
Yeah, fantastic. And I think with a lot of people with the social life, in especially in my case or women's cases that I talk to, it's the ability to say no. You don't have to go to everything, even if you love that person, even if you love, like you said, you love the dinners. But it's
Yeah.
okay not to go to every single one. It's okay not to say yes to every single invite, right? As long as you do so respectfully and you draw your boundary for yourself and understand what you need, then it's okay, right? I think that's a very clear picture of really understanding yourself.
And you don't have to justify your reasons for saying no. I think we have this like, but because
Yeah,
of this, like apologetic. No, you can say no. Because
sorry.
there's a good example. Like now that I've gotten into the art world, I get invited to all the openings. I've met some other artist friends. I'm like, they have events like all the
Yeah,
time. And I just energetically can't go to them all. But I don't want to slight them. And so there's ways to be like, I love your work. It looks amazing. I can't come Friday, but I'm happy to stop by next week. Is it open? We can have a
yeah.
coffee. Like I'd love for you to tell me about your work, right? Like I do it that way and navigate the way I want to engage.
Mhm.
And it still serves the relationship, right? So I think that self-awareness though, that's a big piece of this is you getting really clear on like, what do I actually want? What actually works for me? What am I actually a no to? But I've been going through the motions because I think society expects it, or there's these other cultural expectations or social norms or power battles of something in like the social circles. Nah. Yeah.
I just, you know what, one example is that, and I really do believe you don't need to give excuses, but be polite and explain. And I know I have one example of a woman who tried to say no to a dinner invitation. It was like, oh, but it's too far and blah blah blah, and it's too cold and blah blah blah. And they're like, oh, well, we can send a driver over, or you know, we can get you a ride, or we can change the time for you. And it's like, and then it gets really hard to say no, right? Because now they're trying to accommodate all the excuses you gave them, and now you're really in a bad spot. So it's better to be
Yeah.
like, you know what, I love the invitation, thank you so much, I just can't make it. Don't need an excuse, just can't make it, period, punked, right? So I think that's an important distinction there. Thank you for that. And then finally, let's talk about day 7, and then we can wrap up with a bit of general knowledge stuff about reprogramming. Manifesting financial abundance, which is a large part of what I'm trying to do with community, because I do believe that women who are financially independent, who create wealth, can make better choices for their lives because they're not stuck in the role, they're not stuck in the relationship, they're not, you know, there's just a piece of financial abundance that really unlocks freedom for us. So please talk about day 7.
This goes back to, we've touched on a little bit of like limiting
Yeah.
beliefs, because I think this is probably one of the hardest areas to stretch into because of the cultural programming, messages, family, like how you grew up, like all of
Yeah.
these almost like PTSD experiences with money for many women, right? But there's so much truth what you said, Raj. Money empowers you to make different choices that you wouldn't feel like you had the ability to make without it, right? So whether that's impact, whether that's personal life, whether that's leaving situations that no longer serve you, whether that's chasing new dreams and like expanding and growing other things, like it just
Getting
gives
the
you
studio,
choices,
yeah.
right? Like pursuing like full tilt life as an artist, right? Having the ability to do that is a big deal. And finance is just a fact of it, right? So you're going to find some resistance. Again, going back to my example of like, you might have to deal with a limiting belief first before you can then start to like latch onto a vision for what that could look like. But think about, again, the prompts we've used for most of these examples about how do you feel? What do you want to do with that money? How does it feel to know you can say yes to things? How does it feel to know you can say no to things? How would it feel to have an app where you can pop up your investments and see 6 figures, 7 figures, yada, yada, yada? How would it feel to say yes to the random trip invitation to Europe with a bunch of girlfriends that's going to cost 10K or 15K or whatever? How would it feel to upgrade to first class and actually be in comfort on your transnational flight instead of like neck cracked and like all these other things, right? Back hurting, like all of that, right? So think
Yeah.
about the feeling and the experiences of what the wealth and abundance will feel like for you and what matters. Because again, not everybody is going to be motivated by luxury cars, designer handbags, yada, 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 social life status. If you are brilliant, fantastic, wonderful, amazing, if that's your jam, own it, and anchor into like how confident you feel when you're in those places and how you want to feel part of those level conversations of people with money having at a different level, because the conversations are different, right?
Mhm.
So think about the experiences and feelings that having more wealth and abundance would offer you and the ones that matter to you, and start there. Because that gets you over the hump of if it's possible or not. That gets you into the place of, again, dreaming this or better, and like projecting into a potential future and starting to kind of bridge that gap.
And what I loved at Wayfinder Summit that we had happen with one of the women, where she had a gut reaction to one of the images that you'd put out that we'd curated. And she, it was one of those moments where she said, I'm not ashamed to say this, and I'm going to say it out loud. I want wealth. And it was such like every woman in the room was like, oh, a little bit, but then cheered because they
Yeah.
want it too. But to say it, we've been
Yes.
taught that it's such a nasty thing. It's such a money grabbing thing to want, right? But she's like, no, I realized when I saw this card with this mansion and this woman who looks confident and independent, I want wealth. I want to feel secure. I want to feel confident. I'm not ashamed. I think that's the key. I'm not ashamed to want it.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that people need to get, women especially
Yeah.
need to get past. So it's
Yeah.
a very important point. Yeah.
Yeah. There's tons of mindset work to be done on this topic, but I think the biggest thing is what you can do with it, right? Because money is not inherently evil, bad, or otherwise. It's a tool. It's an
Yeah.
exchange of value. It's energy. It's a tool. What you do with it is what matters. And so that's where if you can dream into like what you do with your abundance. Again, not that you have to be Miss Altruistic Kathy and give it all away. That's not the point either. Like, you're allowed to experience wealth and
Yeah.
appreciate it and have lovely like experiential things happen, right? There's
Yeah.
no shame in that. But I think the point, what was so powerful about that example is like the confidence she envisioned of being in that place of total security, ability to
Yeah.
have more impact, ability to make a difference, ability to support her family, ability to do the things that she'd been putting off or saying she couldn't do, right? It
Mhm.
feels different. It feels different.
Yeah. And I think that we often hear about if women rise, then the society rises. And I think there is something to that. Men do
So
wonderful
many
things, but women are
things.
especially known for looking after their societies, their villages, etc. So let's talk a little bit about reprogramming. Because look, the fact is that I'm not a visual person, and I only came to visualization about 3 years ago. And even now I'm like, am I doing this right? So it's like habit forming is a reprogramming, right? Visualization is a reprogramming. Now, I don't necessarily agree with every element of what Joe Dispenza says, but I was listening to Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, who's fantastic, and I love that podcast. And he talks about the power of thoughts. Now, we hear this a lot, right? But he gave one specific example where it was like for 7 days, every single day, they gave an hour to each person in a group, a control group, to learn piano chords. Yeah.
Mhm.
Great. So they sit there and they run through them every single day for 7 days. The other group was taught to think through those same scales and chords, right? All they did for 1 hour was imagine it, close their eyes and imagine them running through their chords. And both
Yep, yep,
of them, by the end of the 7 days, could play exactly
yep,
that
yep,
scale on the piano.
yep,
So
yep.
chords, I think, is guitars, scales is piano. Anyway, but what I was going to say was what's amazing about that, because I love statistics. I'm a logic person. And when I hear scientific studies, I'm like, yeah, that's it. But that is exactly what habits are, right? It's almost like tricking our brain because we're told we are who we are by the time we hit adulthood. Most of our habits are ingrained by 35. And visualization is about reprogramming too, right? It's about our thought processes. So when we're talking about redesigning our life, I'd love to know what your first recommendation is, or what's the first step that people can take towards that reprogramming, right? So that they can align their goals with their visualization. So if you could speak a bit more about
Yeah,
Yeah,
such a
that.
brilliant
Specific
example
one.
because again, oh, it's got echoey. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
Brilliant example. I think that's a great example. There's also examples just like that of sports, of somebody imagining doing free throws and like the
Mhm.
muscles understand what the brain is running through. So it's training yourself. And that's part of, again, programming your brain with these intentional decisions of what you're going for is a piece of it. But to the point of where to start, it starts with possibility and kind of like tuning in to, without judgment, what it is that you want, and like latching on to those, again, innate reactions of like, oh, this, oh, this, oh, that's exciting. That would be amazing. That would feel fantastic. That would feel so good. That would feel really secure. That would feel really expansive. It's starting there with just the idea loosely of like what would feel like a direction you want to move in any one of those areas or other areas in your life or work or just personal experience,
Yeah.
right? Starting with paying attention to where you respond positively. And so I think that's a big step is self-awareness
Yeah.
of, because we unconsciously limit ourselves in so many things. We just get on autopilot. And whether it's beliefs that things aren't for us, whether it's we're on the right track, whether we're doing what we're supposed to, whether it's all the shoulding that we get wrapped up in, we just assume that's the way. And I think step one is accepting it can be different. That's really step one, because that opens you up to then figuring out what different, deciding what different, and then moving towards those opportunities when they present themselves, right? But I think step one is acceptance, is this aspect of my life could be different and better.
Okay,
And start with that.
fantastic. And how would you suggest that they can visualize their long-term, let's say, dreams, while still staying present and productive in their daily lives? Because I mean, like I said, you're not sitting there for an hour every day manifesting
Yeah.
that. I've got my vision board sitting next to my screen. I don't look at it every single day and study it. It's just there, right? But what would you suggest in terms of that? Like being able to envision those possibilities, but still remain productive and not feel a bit depressed that you don't have it already.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I'm going to give you another analogy. And this is something, again, that another coach in my long history of personal development supported me with, and it just stuck with me because it's such an obvious example. So like there's something powerful in the set it and forget it. Like once you make a decision and have a thought in your mind, it doesn't just disappear. You don't have to rethink it for it to stay active, right?
Like a mantra or or what affirmation. Yeah.
It doesn't need to be that. Thoughts
Yeah.
they're gonna exist. Once you have a new thought, like, oh, I want an art studio, that thought's not gonna go away. I don't have to think it every day. Like it is planted. Like your brain is good. Your brain is good at that. That's step one of reprogramming.
Love
Like
it.
you have a new thought.
Yeah.
It's aware of a new thing. And so if you think of it like biggest commercial example ever, ordering from Amazon.
Yeah.
You decide what you want, you place an order, and then you don't have to check every 5 minutes if it's on its way. You're not checking the tracking. You're not going back and seeing, did the order come through?
Yeah.
You're not going back and double thinking your order. Like you wait for it to arrive and you trust that it will arrive. And it's a little bit of that space. Trust is the big thing. And, it's not about having the death grip of urgency. I must make this happen today. Like that achiever training, perfectionist achiever ship that we've been programmed to do. It's not that. It's, I know what I want. I'll see it. I'll know it when I see it. And it's a little bit of anchoring into that side of trust. Not that you can't take steps. Obviously, searching for a space is a step, right? But I'll know it when I see it. I don't have to force something. There's no force involved in lifestyle design. There is vision, decision, and intention, and then sort of like trust and allowance that you'll recognize, because there's so many things in front of you on a basis, or that will come into your purview once you know what to filter in and filter out. And that's the programming, is the filtering of information. That's the trust, is trusting that you've done the step and now you'll see it when it comes. It sounds, that sounds more woo, but
yeah, no, but I think that there's something to that, because it does come back to this. It works the same way with negative thoughts. So why not put a positive and visionary one in there instead of something that's self-limiting or a bit more destructive? So I'm fully on board with that. So one last question before we close it out. I love that we thought that this would be a fast, quick conversation, and here we are still an hour later. We always love to talk, Katrina.
We do.
There's one last question that I'd love for you to answer. What's the one visualization practice that you personally swear by, and how has it shaped your journey as a life designer?
Actually, I think it's more the written side of things is what I've leaned into more over the years, but it's a specific way of writing out your visions. It's writing it in the future tense of having the thing or being the person, right? So if you can fast forward 6 months, because a lot of times like future, like 10 years is like very overwhelmed for somebody trying to visualize, like that's too big of a leap. 6 months. In 6 months time, I celebrate that I just had my amazing show. I celebrate that one of my clients achieved this amazing thing. I just got off stage speaking at this event. I hit this milestone in our company ahead of time and like above projections. Like, and it feels like this. And to celebrate, I'm doing this, right? It's getting, and again, it's another way of visualizing rather.
Mhm.
But putting yourself into the future of having, being, doing the things that you
Yeah,
want. And I find that again, it's a way of programming your brain. Like, that's where we're headed.
yeah,
That's where we're headed. That's the experience we want. That's what we want to celebrate. That's what we want to be living, and making it more real. Because again, just like that example, the
yeah.
more you see it, it becomes real. And like your body and everything else will follow it. And so putting those thoughts more anchored in your brain with the feeling, the emotion, the experience of it, super powerful for reprogramming. So
I've heard of a couple of celebrities who have talked about this very openly, and one of them is Jennifer Aniston. I mean, we know the Jim Carrey one, he wrote himself a check for a
yeah,
million and then he made a million.
yeah,
Jennifer
yeah,
Aniston has talked about she just was grateful. She's, I'm grateful to be a successful actress. And she'd said
totally.
that to herself, and that was her thought, and that's what she went with. And then the other
Yep.
one who I absolutely adore is Hannah Waddington, who was
Mhm.
in Ted Lasso. And she talked about her daughter was sick. She went out into the back garden and she said, you know, thank you for, just kind of spoke to the sky and said, thank you for healing my daughter and for giving me. And she was just thinking into the future. And for some people, this is very abstract, right? I mean, when I hear it, I'm like, I'm just gonna thank you for something that doesn't make any sense. But it's this certainty that you have in your head that no, it's gonna get better, and this is what it's gonna be, and this is who I'm gonna be, and this is how it's gonna feel. And I think you just perfectly described exactly that. And I think people have heard this from different celebrities and heard it in the mainstream,
Yeah.
but it's harder to envision for yourself because of the self-limiting beliefs. So I think you nailed that in terms of you got to kind of celebrate it and do it in a short-term period where you can
Yeah.
see the future. You can see that, hey, if I work hard, I'm going to have that in 6 months, and
The
this is
next
what it's
step.
going to feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
little steps at a time, right? Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. Do you have any final words before we close out?
No, I'm open to questions as always, but I think
Yeah.
again, even if you have 5-10 minutes to do these exercises, it's worth it. Again, it doesn't have to be an hour slog every day, like all of that overachiever perfectionist approach to visualizing and manifesting and all the things. Nah, like
Yeah.
you'd be
Relax.
amazed the power of something small, of just a new thought, a new
Mm,
decision, a new level of clarity in one aspect of your life, work, relationships, anything that you decide is for you.
yeah.
And then the future is going to be yours. And not the
Uh,
certainty, but the trust that you'll find the path to getting there, and the experience of imagining what it'd like to have it. Like those are so, so, so powerful, and it can take 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
play, see what you respond to, tune into the reactions you have. Like that's my biggest tip, is like, let yourself go back to that sort of childlike dreaming and reacting without judgment of the
Yeah.
things that you find that you desire. And that's true to you.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that it's been about intention and trust, because I think those things can help you throughout your life. So fantastic. Thank you so much. For everybody who's listening, all the information that you need will be below this video. If you are not in the community already, if you're in the community, then this will be added to the classroom so that you can watch it. So thank you so much again, Katrina. It's all